Hello everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast interlude as part of the hyphenate. This audio podcast interlude as part of the BRIX and Brash. This audio podcast is part of the Squadron Crisis and Inspectorate, and this audio podcast interlude as part of a Storm Robotics production. Today, looking at a in around a particular industrial or environmental industrial and environmental sort of herbicide, and this is sort of information in around a particular herbicide that historically is toxicological. This herbicide is known as historically known as Paraquat, the information here is a little bit of an overview, and there will be some citations or reference in as part of this audio podcast interlude. So a bit of intro in as part of this. One of the best known herbicides is bipyridinium compound Paraquat, which is the chemical name. The chemical name is 1,1-dimethyl 4,4 bipyridinium dichloride. Paraquat is the most widely used, or have been have been have been evidenced as one of the most broadly used or utilized herbicides, and it was first or initially synthesized back in the late 1800s, around 1882, and it was one of the it was one of the largest share of the global herbicide market until recently taken over, or in more recent times it have been taken over by glyphosate. Its herbicide properties were discovered only in 1955, after it was initially identified in 1882, and it was discovered in amongst pharmaceutics, in among pharmaceutical laboratories, where it was produced as commercially in amongst the treatment and the rid of pesticides. When investigated, or sorry, when ingested in dosages, Paraquat has life-threatening effects on the gastrointestinal tract, kidneys, liver, heart, and other organs. The minimum lethal dose of Paraquat is in humans is evidenced as in around approximately 3.5 milligrams per kilo, and acute poisoning may cause respiratory distress. Death is normally due to progressive pulmonary fibrosis and epithelial proliferation in the lungs, and where renal failure or kidney failure also ensues, and may sort of ensues, where renal failure also, or kidney failure also ensues. In the past few decades, if not a little bit longer, Paraquat has been a popular agent, but recent experience indicates it has been a popular agent in as far as suicide is concerned, and it is where in amongst literature informs that there have been less reportings in around its use as a form of poisoning. Paraquat is also highly toxic a highly toxic compound, and the management of poisoning requires a great deal of understanding for proper management procedures. At the same time, there have been commercial products that have been aligned to Paraquat in the form of liquid concentrates, and also in combination with other herbicides with other herbicides. In around some of the signs and symptoms, Paraquat is carcinogenic, mutagenic, and ecotoxic. Paraquat ingestion includes a burning pain in the mouth, throat, chest, and upper abdomen, edema, where edema ensues, pancreatitis, and other pathophysiology is and can be detrimented, owing to where Paraquat ingestion, for example, can then causes problems around the central nervous system, and affects the central nervous system. Both types one both both so whilst that there in literature there are two forms of Paraquat, but both types 1 Paraquat and type 2 Paraquat accumulate, and biotransformation of Paraquat in amongst them when it is where it is where and where it is where it affects where it can affect. It also results in free radical production with resulting peroxidation and cell injury. Initial clinical signs also depend on the route of exposure. There can be sort of in around where there can be dry and fissured hands, horizontal ridging or loss of fingernails, ulceration, and abrasion. There can be symptoms in around cough, dyspnea, and tachypnea. Usually appear in around 2 to 4 days following Paraquat ingestion, but may be delayed as long as 14 days. In addition, some agricultural employees can be exposed through prolonged inhalation of spray droplets and develop nosebleeds due to local damage. In around some of the environmental issues, Paraquat binds rapidly to clay materials in soils, and when absorbed, it is biologically inactive. It also binds to humus and other organic materials, and this results in no or very low soil residues or leaching in water sour. Paraquat is also used to control broad-leaved weeds and grasses, being less effective on deep-rooted plants such as dandelions. It does not harm bark, and thus is broadly used or utilized for weed control in fruit orchards and plantation crops, including coffee, cocoa, coconut, and oil palms, rubber, bananas, vines, olives, teas, ornamental trees, and shrubs, and in also forestry environs. Other uses of Paraquat include wood control sort of wood control, onion in around onion in around in around in around also in around where onions and leeks and asparagus are grown. Although toxic to fish, Paraquat is also used as an aquatic herbicide where it is absorbed by plant matter and silt. Exposure to paraquat from a spray drift may occur in windy weather, windy climate through though field though investigations sort of inform or suggest that airborne paraquat concentration declines markedly within a few meters of the sprayed area. In around and particularly around the toxicology, damage to proximal renal or kidney tubules is often more reversible than the destruction to lung tissue. However, impaired renal function or kidney function may play a critical role in determining the route of paraquat poisoning. Normal tubule cells actively separate or paraquat into voided urine and efficiently clearing it from the blood. However, high cells in the blood, particularly white cells, for example, in the blood, poison the sort of secretory mechanism and may destroy cells or additional cells. Although much concern have been in amongst the literature has highlighted in around the effects caused by this by sort of the mechanistics. There have been there have been these have been either very rare or non-existent. Most paraquat that contaminates most paraquat that also contaminates is where it can be during the consumption of it can be in around where there is around drugs and substance abuse, in around drugs and substance abuse. So for example, there can be also where there's a combustion of leaf material itself, in around where a substance drugs and substance abuse is concerned, and this this at the same time presents some some toxicity or toxic hazard. In around the treatment around paraquat, where poisoning is concerned, no antidote for poisoning sort of has been unanimously evidenced. Although it has been recommended that high absorbent Fuller's Earth is administered or prescribed. Hospital care must be sought without delay if paraquat poisoning is or has been evident. Immediate gastrointestinal decontamination with treatments such as bentonite or activated charcoal sort of also have been evidenced in amongst the literature, and has existed. Maintaining urinary output by administering intravenous fluids, and and around fluid monitoring is important in case of in the cases of in case of renal function renal in around the case of renal conditions. In around sort of the main health issues, being acutely toxic at spray strength. One of the greatest risks to workers in amongst the literature is during the mixing and loading of the paraquat herbicide. It can be serious and fatal. An incident also incident had occurred in the early 90s in the United Kingdom, where an agricultural worker had passed away or died after being splashed in the face with paraquat when they dropped a container. In the mid 90s or towards the mid 90s, a farm worker also in the United Kingdom suffered with a severe rash and infection after applying paraquat after applying Paraquat, and a similar incident was also documented in the early 90s. Also in the early 90s. Um, in around the analytical investigation. So, following some of the following investigation, laboratory investigations are useful or helpful for investigating Paraquat in around Paraquat. So, firstly, the use of high performance liquid chromatography, HPLC. Secondly, around concentration of Paraquat in water that may be determined by passing the sample through a cation exchange, a cation exchange, a column followed by washing, elution, and photometric measurement. And thirdly, other investigations include thin layer chromatography, hydrogenation or pyrolysis, followed by gas chromatographic separation and detection by flame ionization. So that draws this audio podcast to a close. It was an audio podcast just looking at an overview around the toxicology of the herbicide Paraquat. This has been an audio podcast as part of the Hyphenate. This audio podcast been as part of the Z BRIX and BRASH, and this audio podcast as part of the Squall and Crisis and Inspectorate, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Robotics production and Interlude.